Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to this new edition of the Laptop Site Chat. Today, I am very happy and honored to have Emma Newman, the Chief Revenue Officer of and proud owner of a beautiful Starbucks mug, as you could have seen a minute ago, Chief Revenue Officer for EMEA of Pubmatic. And we also have Lucia Mastromauro, who is VP of Global Head of Client Partnership and Western Europe Sales. That's a mouthful, Lucia. Welcome.
I know.
Means you have so many things to do, right?
They keep on giving me more work for sure.
So yeah, great to have you both here. Thanks very much for accepting the invitation. First, obviously you're joining from your home, so I just want to ask a simple question of how you're doing, how's your family doing, how you adapting to the work from home. It's been what, 3 weeks now? 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks? How's it going?
I definitely think that there's a new sort of, forget COVID for a second, there's a new disease on the block, which is, blue jeans and conference call fatigue. And I'm definitely suffering from that. And my family are definitely suffering of hearing me shouting to my laptop for most of the day, some of it swearing when the network goes down at a very inopportune moment, which I'm just warning people it might do. But no, we seem to have, fallen into some kind of new normal. We try not to talk to each other during the day. That's helping.
Lucia, you have teams all over the place, right? Are you all kind of interacting with each other, and you managed to keep in contact with the team as you were when you were in the office?
I think we've been busier than ever, to be honest. It has been non-stop. I'm used to being on calls all the time because I travel a lot with my role. So I'm often in a hotel room somewhere at 5 a.m. or 8 p.m. on calls with different regions. But this change has meant that a lot of people that normally are used to go to the office and be sociable have found the change quite significant. I think people are actually being way more productive than normally because they're very focused, looking at the screen, and as Emma said, just shouting at the screen all day.
Yeah, is it something that can change the way we work going forward? Do you think more people will opt to work from home now and then, or will everyone be like so fed up of this kind of few weeks that we're spending there that everyone will want to go back to the office?
I think that people will want to spend time in the office and with their colleagues until the reality of commuting kicks in. Joking aside, I think the culture, certainly in the industry that we work in, a lot of us travel a lot, and a lot of us have customers that are remote from us anyway. So we don't always meet our customers face to face. So we tend to have a culture of trying to be flexible about these things, obviously. I do think having it enforced upon you for a long period of time can be a little bit draining. So I'm sure when this is over, perhaps, we'll spend more time with our colleagues, but, we'll forget what this was like. And before you know it, we'll be back to doing this. I do think that perhaps organizations that were slightly less open to remote working, maybe will sort of embrace it a bit more, because they'll realize that you can be just as productive, if not more productive, when you're not in the office all of the time.
Yeah, is it changing in the? I mean, yeah. you've had to talk to quite a lot of clients last week with the CEO announcement, Lucia. How is that changing relationship with clients? Do you feel it's easier to, because the face-to-face element is also important, right, in customer relationship when you want to have a discussion, whether it's customer service or negotiations or whatever. Are you able to continue doing that now, or is it making things more complicated, or on the contrary, are people more like open-minded and maybe less busy with like the things happening in the office and everything?
I think people are a bit more available, to be honest. As you mentioned, we announced a new CEO last week, and I had to call our top clients the day before, in the morning before the press release went out, very quickly. So it was a long list of people that we had to get hold of, and I was pleasantly surprised that I actually managed, within a very short time around, get all our C-level clients on the line from our top clients very quickly. They were also very open and very welcoming of talking to us. I think a lot of companies out there are a bit worried about how to approach a conversation with a client, feeling a little bit like maybe this is bad timing to ask for a call or for a meeting. But what I saw were human beings on the other side, very glad to have something interesting to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that we're finding that just picking up the phone and having a 15-minute conversation with a client is welcome, whereas perhaps when things were normal, having a 15-minute conversation was a bit of a pain and it was difficult to get that time. But we find that a lot of businesses, as they're adapting, and to your point, Lucia, people are much more available and open and actually want to have human interaction and actually want to talk about things that are maybe not, the day-to-day. So we find that we're having a lot more conversations and generally just asking people how they are as individuals, but also asking them, how is your business doing? What are you seeing? And more importantly, here's what we're hearing. So I find that people are much more open to sharing information at this particular moment in time, things that perhaps people would sort of keep to themselves a little bit. People are being much more open about what's happening, they're seeing what they're hearing. And then if you just finish the conversation with, okay, well, how can we help you? And sometimes it will be like, you know what, we're fine, and that's great. But other times, we've armed our teams with some very sort of, I guess, basic questions, but some ideas as to, look, these are things that we're seeing working, in other instances, be that with other, with other publishers or with other buyers, and this is what we're seeing. Let's see how we can help you with that. So I think people are much more open to trying new things as well. Definitely seeing a little bit more creativity in the way people think and approach things. And I hope that will continue, because it does mean that we can, react much more quickly, I think. And they do say that, when you're in a crisis, it does sort of drive innovation and invention. I think we're definitely seeing that.
One of the things we've noticed is that a lot of those discussions, because people are at home, it's a lot more personal. Like you're creating a different type of relationship because you're talking to someone who's sitting at their, in their couch or in their bedroom or in their home office, whatever. So I find that videos are usually most often on, right? While when you're in the office, sometimes people don't turn video on. So it feels like you create a slightly different relationship, and yeah, I agree with you. There's a personal element, right? Because of the situation, because of the health crisis, because of the fact that you're at home, it creates a slightly different relationship with the people you talk to.
Yeah, I found myself singing "Happy Birthday" to somebody's child today, which was random. But anyway, whatever, fine.
I'm still waiting to see your dog.
I've met countless children, dogs, children, cats, plants. So it's been very interesting because you do get to know the human being a little bit more, and I think a lot of the clients. I think the main difference is normally within organizations. Most people are used to Blue Jeans or Zoom or Teams calls, but when talking to C-level folks, there were sort of those on the last frontier of technology that are the people that are like, I don't know how this works. Now they all know how technology works, at least video conferencing technology. And that every so often I hear a comment about it where they're very keen to make sure that their teams are on camera. There's a lot of banter happening, which I think it's helping also people get through this in a sort of more lighthearted way.
There's definitely an element, and what you were referring to as well, right? Of sharing insights, sharing data, sharing we're rolling this together. We're going to get out of this together. So how can we help each other, irrespective of being customers, suppliers, partners, competitors. There's a bigger level of solidarity almost that's being deployed.
Yeah, and I think there's more of a sense of urgency as well. So we often talk about almost manufacturing a sense of urgency to get people to do things differently, and to take a call and to have those conversations. But I think people are starting to realise actually there's a finite period of time. This is not going to go on forever. So let's use this hopefully relatively short period of time to make some of those changes. So I think genuinely, I thought things like new business would slow down. I'm not really seeing that. I'm actually seeing people go, right, well, let's take this opportunity. There's not much else we can do. Let's get the contract through. Let's get legal on board. Let's do this. Let's do that. So that when we do come out of this, hopefully there is that kind of V-shape effect. I think Martin Sorrell was talking about that the other day. So that when we do hit the bottom and we suddenly get that, hopefully, hockey stick, then we're ready to go.
What's your analysis of the impact business-wise? Is it how long is the pause going to last? Is it paused, or is it delayed, or is it cancelled campaigns? What do you expect in terms of like investments, both sides, right? Emma, you've got the publisher side, and you've got what like publishers are looking at. Lucia, you've got brands and agencies that you're talking to on a daily basis. What's going to happen? Is it a month of April thing? Is it a second quarter thing? Is it the rest of the year? What are you preparing for, and what are your forecasting in your business right now?
I've spent the past week or two talking to, especially mostly agency C-level, and trying to have a very open conversation with them on what they are seeing, what they're forecasting versus what we are seeing and what we are forecasting. We've seen a mixed bag, obviously, in some verticals where like travel, finance, insurance, and so on, that there has been a massive slowdown. But we've seen other verticals actually shoot up. And some of the markets where we expected to slow down from day one, when quarantine kicked in, we actually saw some markets actually accelerate and grow faster. I don't know for sure if it is some marketeers trying to burn out budget fast, or if it is campaigns that were taking the advantage of people actually being more online and being more focused on the news and so on. We are doing a lot of analysis internally and trying to feed data into especially our agency clients and bigger brands to help them navigate how they are buying. We do see that CPMs have gone down on a number of places, so we are trying to help them navigate that.
Do they see that do they see that as an opportunity, that inventory generally is cheaper, more available? Is there an opportunistic approach by some of them? Do you see that?
I think mostly agencies are very keen to understand the dynamics there for sure, and how they can navigate and stretch their clients' budget a little bit further with regards to what they can achieve versus the media that's available. I think at the moment still there is a lot of uncertainty on how long this will last. So people are preparing a bit for the worst, hoping for the best, and checking in on a regular basis and making sure that they keep their partners close. So as I said at the beginning, we've been busier than normal because we see that a lot of our clients are highly engaged and really trying to navigate, week by week on what's happening, which is positive, and it helps everyone build up, more trust, more closer relationship.
It shows flexibility, right? It shows that whenever things get better,
Exactly.
then you can pick things up. What are you seeing, Emma, on the pub side?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, which is we try and look at it holistically, because obviously we have publisher clients who are seeing an enormous amount of traffic because everyone's online, they're stuck indoors. The challenge we've got is how do we maintain the value of that traffic, because a lot of it is potentially generated around content that perhaps brands don't want to be aligned with. So we've worked really hard with our publishers to develop inventory packages that perhaps avoid the Corona word or Corona content, because brands do still need to spend. I think that there's, I've spent a lot of time talking to publishers, understanding what their challenges are. And it's very much we've got all this inventory, but it's not very valuable. How do we make it more valuable? How do we make it more discoverable? So we've worked a lot with our publishers to help them do that. We've seen, initially a drop in the brand spend and more of an uptick in open market, which has obviously kept dollars flowing, so that's really useful. But, speaking to quite a lot of agencies over the last few days, a lot of the agents are saying, yes, they've seen a drop-off in brand spend in some sectors, which is to be expected, so travel, entertainment, that kind of thing. But they've seen it uptick in others. And in fact, some larger brands have reduced their direct response spending because they can't fulfill, the outcome of that direct response interaction, and have actually moved into branding spending. Because there's, a great piece of research, I can't remember where, I was referencing it earlier today, and I can't remember, but I've read it in the last few days, which is, how do you, maintain your brand awareness in these times? Because at a time of crisis is the time when consumers are more likely to assess their brand loyalty and will shift brand loyalty. So if you think about Tesco's, for example, they've got a huge amount of people shopping at Tesco's now for obvious reasons who were not Tesco shoppers prior to the crisis. Now, how do they then retain those customers once the crisis is over and they don't all just go back to shopping, where they shopped previously? So there's still a lot that can be done during a period such as this, that advertising will obviously help with. So I think that people were in a blind panic, I guess, might not be too strong a phrase, and when this all sort of kicked off a couple of weeks ago. And brands are now taking the time to assess, right, okay, I need to maintain a presence. What does that presence look like that's appropriate at this particular moment in time? Do I need to change my messaging? Do I need to change my creative? I definitely need to change my media plan because half of it was going into outdoor and cinema, and that doesn't exist anymore. So then how do I move it to digital? Is linear TV the right place for me? Because actually everyone's on streaming at the moment. So do I need to think about actually moving my TV budgets onto streaming at the moment? So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think it's happening now. And I'm hoping that, by the time, we get another couple of weeks out of the way, a lot of this back end work has happened, then we'll start to see again a little bit of normalcy. And I'm hoping that spend will start to pick up again.
How much of it do you think is, because you were saying, obviously, like cinemas, restaurants. I was on the phone with an agency yesterday. It was telling me that all of the McDonald's budget were on hold until restaurants can reopen, basically. Mm-hmm. How much of that is related to the lockdown versus just the general, economic recession and kind of longer term effects? Is it gonna start again as soon as Italy or Spain or the countries that have been more strict on the lockdown than probably the UK, or I think even Norway is pretty much running as normal. Do you think that the end of the lockdown or the loosening of those restrictions will be the start of the spend again?
Well, I think that I don't think you can differentiate between the two, right? So the recession, if that's what we want to call it, is a direct consequence of the lockdown. So most economies were in a pretty good. It's kind of the sad thing. Most economies were in a pretty good state until this happened. I think that you'll start to see. I think that we need an end game, and I think we need an end plan. It's very difficult for brands to plan when they don't know what the exit strategy looks like. I believe that once we get an exit strategy, then people can start planning accordingly. And even if the exit strategy is we're in the lockdown for another 6 weeks, but at that point life should return to normal, then brands can plan accordingly.
I think it might be harder to reflect it immediately within media buying, but as a brand, I think this is a moment of opportunity. If you look at from an anthropological perspective, everyone's forced into a massive change of behavior. Their normal is no longer normal. Their routines are no more. So it's a very interesting time for any brand to really try and sneak in. And as you mentioned with that research, in times of crisis, people do change loyalty. But I think it's bigger than that. I think it has really, this is a massive experiment for how brands can really try and engage with consumers in a very creative way. I haven't really seen much. I think brands are more afraid to get it wrong than anything. But I think it's a massive opportunity. If I was still a brand, I would be trying to do something quick, not necessarily using a lot of production to engage consumers, to entertain them. Consumers are at home bored. They are working twice as much, those that still have a job like us, and they can do that job remotely. But there's a lot of people that even though trying to exercise and consume content, they're still fairly bored. And I think brands could initiate some really interesting experiments in this space, which then obviously, hopefully, leads to better, more loyalty, better brand sentiment, and more media spend for us. But I think it's a really interesting time. Should not be seen as just as a negative.
It's an experiment, but it's a global, real life, no backup experiment. So it makes it a more difficult. It's not like you can try on a couple of markets and see if it works, right?
Yeah, I think in terms of media buying, though, if sorry, I think if we want to look at when things will start again, we should look to China. I think Mark Reed is being very open about talking about how this affected WPP's business in China for the entirety of Q1. It was really bad for them, but now things are picking up. Hotels, the hotel business is coming back again. Obviously, less on the travel and air travel, but there are many areas that were completely at a halt in China and now are coming back and picking up, and media is following as well.
But I just think that, I mean, you talked about there's no backup plan, but I think it's almost, unless you're really inappropriate, there's very little that you can do that's not the right thing to do right now. The worst thing a brand can do is go totally silent.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it's not being there is worse than being there with an untested message, because the minute you're true or you're honest, interesting. Let's go back to what was the main discussion you were probably having with publishers and brands before that happened. Identity and the all the work we have to do as an industry to kind of reinvent how we identify users. Is that still a topic? You said you were on the phone with plenty of agencies last week, Lucia. Is this still something they want to talk about, or has it been completely pushed aside and that's, we'll deal with this when we have time? Right now it's crisis management mode.
Now is the time, basically. I've seen every single agency group discussing identity right now. It's a topic that they're really keen to hear what we think, what every other vendor in the market thinks, what their strategy is, what their roadmap to it is. I'm coming out of this call and jumping into a call with C-level from one of the top 6 holding groups globally, also to present on that. So the time really is now. I think people, even though that they're really busy, they're really focused. And they're using this time to learn, to improve their strategy, to look at alternatives, and to find paths for quick growth once the quarantine is over. And identity is one of the biggest topics, especially amongst agencies at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been talking to a lot of publishers about, not just how do we help them in this period of time, so how do we help them generate revenue today, but also how do we help them future-proof their business moving forward. And obviously a key part of that is, is identity, and making sure that when we come out of this, and it's a very complex ecosystem right now, and I think that, we're going from one complex ecosystem to potentially another. And I think part of our job as an industry is to ensure that identity doesn't become another sort of millstone around a publisher or a buyer's neck. We need to make this as simple as we possibly can. Now, ideally, we'd have one identity solution, but we all know that that's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. So how do we help publishers and buyers, to some extent, navigate what already is a plethora of identity solutions out there, and how do we help them understand which ones work best for certain situations? And how do we help them actually work with all of them? Because there will be a period of time, finite that it is, where you've gotten the opportunity to A/B test, different identity solutions. And I think that that's really where we've been focusing. We work with our publishers. We try and bring them tools that help them make strategic decisions. We don't make the decision for them. That's not our job. But our job is to give them the tools that enable them to make those decisions. So we've been working a lot on an identity hub solution that's built on Prebid, which covers most of the ecosystem, so that publishers can work with that and use this time to do some testing.
I fully agree with you, obviously, and I was thinking about the fact that a lot of the times in the discussion we're having, the problem seems obvious in theory, but people don't really put numbers behind them, like what's actually the impact, what's the potential uplift of doing things better. Do you think? And I was looking at there was a report published by BitSwitch, I think yesterday, Programmatic Insights. They were showing that basically non-identifiable impressions were worth about half the value of identifiable impression, right? But we don't have a lot of those numbers. We don't have, it's not something that really circulates. Like you know from the top of your head, you say, yes, like Safari is less valuable, but by how much? Nah, no one really knows. Yes, cookie matching is an issue, but like we don't really know, what the impact is. Do you think this is getting, because this is the best time? I mean, you've got time, you've got probably a lower workload in terms of like managing campaigns and everything. Do you think agencies and publishers are taking advantage of this time to really quantify the problem a bit better, or is this still something that is kind of a bit of a fuzzy math type of approach?
I think it's difficult. I think yes, they are. I think the challenge we have right now is that the value of inventory has dropped anyway. So you're not comparing apples with apples. If we were doing this 6 weeks ago, then yeah, I think you would get a much clearer picture. I think to your point, we all know in our guts, and most of us have been in this industry for a long time now, that an identifiable impression is worth X times a non-identifiable impression. It's the X that we don't quite know. I would say that, yes, do testing. Are we going to get a definite insight at this particular moment in time because prices are all over the place? Possibly not.
Well, yes. What I would say is, for those that don't know Adform, we were born in the Nordics, and the Nordics and Germany are massive markets for us, and those are markets that correlate very highly with Safari. So we've seen this problem for quite a while now, and we are working with you guys at ID5, working with you guys not just on those markets but globally. We know that this is a massive problem for our publishers. It's a massive problem for agencies and buyers as well, because suddenly it might seem like a bargain. The CPM is much lower, but they can't really do much with that impression. They cannot even frequency cap if they don't have any data on it. So it's something that for us is very close to our hearts. We've been working very, very hard to make sure that we bridge that divide for our clients. But what we see is that in countries like Germany and the Nordics, it has collapsed the revenue for many publishers, especially local publishers with the local population, which skews really highly on Safari.
Yeah, and Firefox as well, in Germany in particular, right?
Yeah, in Germany in particular, Denmark, Sweden, and I mean, there are solutions. Well, there are solutions that can kind of bridge that divide a bit. We are working very hard with you guys, as well as on our other solutions internally, just to make sure that when we can identify that user, we help the buyer understand as much as they can from that impression, obviously in a compliance manner. But it's a topic that I can see that, especially with Google's announcement at the beginning of the year, suddenly it has really put a massive pressure on agencies, especially, to find the solution and find the solution fast. I was at CES at the beginning of the year, just a couple of days before Google announced it. We reckoned it would take about a year and a half for Google to really roll back third-party cookies, but when they came with the announcement of 2 years, we were like, well, actually, we've got a little more time there. But the agencies itself, especially one of the big six, the 2 days before the announcement, they were really mad at Google. And I was like, Google must have done something to them. These guys are really mad. And 2 days later, we learned what it was. But it's I do think the time is now. And I do think that this quarantine, if there is a silver lining, it has allowed a lot of executives to take the time to really look at it properly.
Yeah, and I think the other things that they're looking at, as well as the identity solutions that they're using, is how do they how do they compete against the walled gardens in terms of the amount of first-party data that they have? So, just by the very nature of the fact that you have to sign in and you're registered and all of those kinds of things just means they've got your first-party data. Now, premium publishers traditionally haven't really required any kind of sign-in or transference of first-party data because they've relied on cookies. So how do publishers now think about how do they ingest, or first of all, how do they capture this first-party data? What's the value exchange now between them and their consumer, because they haven't asked for it in the past? So what are they doing? How are they changing their strategy to actually give something in addition to then get that first-party data back? Because without that, they can't really compete against the walled gardens. But even if they get that data, where's the scale? So then how do they work together to look at that data? How do they work together to scale out their audiences on and off their platforms in order to be able to capture those budgets from, Facebook and Google? And that's something that we've been working, very closely with our publishers. We launched a data product called Audience Encore just a few weeks ago, which enables them to, use their data and package it into deal IDs and extend it across their own platforms so that they can start to capture some of this scale spend that, they're not going to be able to unless they do that. And it's also really important, I think, that publishers have started finally to understand that they're going to have to start working together now. So we're definitely seeing a lot more conversations around, the rise of the publisher consortia, for want of a better phrase. Because they understand that if they're going to compete, they have to work together. They're not going to be able to do it by themselves. And
that's where you guys and SSPs in general are in a position to bring this scale, which, yeah. I mean, for all the narratives of with header bidding now, SSPs are just pipes and they're totally indifferentiable from each other. There's actually a lot of value that you can bring by aggregating traffic and enriching traffic at the cross publisher level. Yeah. To be able to bring this scale to buyers, yeah. In a kind of a packaged and kind of organized way, right?
And it also gives buyers options, right? So it's not just about the publishers. We talk to a lot of buyers who say we would like to spend somewhere else. We don't want to put all of our ad spend into the walled gardens, but we've got no choice because it's the only way we can, get campaigns away. So yeah. If we can work with publishers to, as you say, develop that scale, then it gives buyers options as well.
Yeah, and 100% agree with your comment at the beginning that it is a product strategy that publishers have to work on. It's not just, hey, let's put a login, a pop-up on top of what we do today, and hope that people will give us their email address. You have to think about what's the value exchange, what's the value proposition. Exactly. Right now, it's like everyone gets into the restaurant, eats the same thing, and some of them pay £10, some of them pay £50, some of them pay £100 because they have different values for publishers depending on if they consent, if they use Safari or Chrome, right? But it's the same meal, and it doesn't feel right? You need to have different menus, you need to have different structures of things you can get if you consent to sharing your personal data, things you get if you consent to log in, things you get if you subscribe, right? And I don't think I don't think it's just an advertising identity issue. It's a much broader value proposition issue that has to be addressed by publishers, and it's a big effort.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, at the end of the day, right? In this whole ecosystem, there are two key, I guess, groups that we need to worry about, and one is the advertiser, the brand. They hold the money, yep. And the other, frankly, is the consumer. And I hear so much chat about everything in between and less chat about the consumer, and a bit more chat now about the advertiser, because advertisers are starting to take a little bit more control now and want a bit more transparency. But let's not forget, without an engaged consumer, none of this matters really. So we need to remember that we need to look after the consumer at the end of the day, and it is about value. And I think publishers that provide value and advertisers that provide value will come out of this stronger.
Yeah, and I think that's also one of the benefits of the identity discussion that we have now and that we have to have as an industry. We cannot do as if consumers were not in the middle of it, because they are, right? And the privacy regulations and the need to take privacy concerns into account will put the consumers back into the middle of the Lumoscape, where they have been absent really for the past like 10, 20 years. And that's good, because that they are the other side of the coin, right? You've got brands on one end, you've got consumers on the other end, and we're in the middle trying to make that connection happen.
Yeah.
But sometimes we've forgotten about that. It's very true.
Yeah, the consumer's the end game. I mean.
Yeah, and with regards to compliance and legislation as well, some of the solutions in there are more daring than others in terms of how much data is transferred, and not you guys obviously, but some of the possible solutions kind of cogitated in market, and some of them worried me a little bit, because it pushes publishers into a realm of PII data, which for me, I feel like they already struggle quite a bit with ad tech in general, and data and GDPR and compliance. If you add on top of that all the regulatory pieces you would have handling PII data, and kind of security systems you would need for that, it's a fascinating conversation, but I do think it is it is one that should not be underestimated as well. I don't want to necessarily sound negative. I think there are many avenues to explore, but some of them should not be taken lightly, more than others.
I think, to your point, right, that just looking at this as a login, tell me everything about you is the minimum situation I need to be able to monetize, isn't good enough. It's not going to work out, because again, we need to have different menus, different type of access. Some people will be more than happy to share their time and their consent, and others won't, and we need to build something that works for everyone. So yeah, totally agree with you. We've got a few more minutes, but before I conclude, just reminding our attendees that you can ask questions if you have any questions that you'd like us to address. There's a chat box on the right hand side of your screen, so feel free to send us your questions. Before we see if there's any questions, just as a kind of a conclusion point, so we're going to get out of this crisis obviously sooner rather than later. What are you most looking forward to for the rest of the year, Q3, Q4? We can't look forward to Cannes anymore, unfortunately, but there are plenty of other things that, as an industry, as a company, as an industry, we are going to have to work on in the coming months. What are you looking for the most in the coming months once we've gone through this phase?
Sorry, trying to get my audio back again. Many things. I think looking forward to actually seeing people face to face. I know we won't have and I'm actually looking forward not to traveling as much as I have been traveling for the past couple of years. So seeing people face to face in the UK, or not with as many trips to the US, and being able to kind of look through to a very positive Q4, like a ramp up curve for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that there's a positive Q4. I think there will be. I think digital will fare better than most media. But actually, the thing I'm really looking forward to is what does the new normal look like moving forward? How are events run? Do we all have to schlep ourselves to Cannes? Actually, no. Yes, we do definitely all have to schlep ourselves to Cannes. But do we all have to go and stand in a massive hall in Barcelona for a week? Who knows? So I think that it will be interesting to see what marketeers, event companies, brands, and consumers and tech companies learn, and how we start to perhaps do things slightly differently. So that's actually the bit that I'm looking forward to, is actually what does the new normal look like? And I really hope that we will continue to, embrace change and embrace the nimbleness that I'm seeing, and embrace the collaboration that I'm currently seeing across the industry, because I think that actually that should be the new normal.
Yeah, the sense of collaboration, the sense of solidarity that we're seeing today.
Yeah,
is something to look forward to in the future, because if we can keep that level of interaction and kind of kindness for each other that we kind of built into those difficult times, I think that's going to make the industry and the world a much better, much happier place to work in. Thank you. On our side, we're really looking forward to working with you guys more and more in the future. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you, Lucia, to be on this call with you. Thank you to all our attendees. This was this week's edition of the Laptop Site Chat webcast. Impossible name to say. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you next week.
yeah, thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.